Year, 1991, location, New York City, Stark Expo grounds, time, 9 a.m. opening day. The morning sun hit the glass of the newly finished Stark Expo Center, sending a cascade of light across the steel and chrome spires surrounding it. The plaza buzzed with the energy of thousands of attendees, all flooding through the security gates, flashing badges, adjusting cameras, and pointing at the holograms flickering over their heads. The reporters were swarming around the place. Then there were those investors and researchers from high places. Students, kids, and even independent researchers were there. Above the entrance, a massive display blinked with animated lettering, Stark Expo 1991, forward to GTHR. Dozens of drones zipped through the air, projecting advertisements, interactive schedules, and stylized previews of key presentations. Holograms of clean energy models, biomech limbs, modular space architecture, and AI symbiosis drifted in the air like a slow-motion ballet. In the center of the grounds, surrounded by elevated walkways and massive LED screens, stood the keynote stage. Stark Industries banners hung from the towers like flags, and the crowd packed tight against the barriers. The security was tight. Melina was in charge of it, so there was nothing to worry about. There was a big timer which was ticking, 10 seconds left before the main event starts. Everyone was there in the main hall. Then, the music cut off as soon as the timer hit 0. The lights shifted to the main podium, and Tony Stark stepped into view. He wore a deep blue suit with a matte black undershirt, no tie, no badge, and no script. Just confidence and clarity. The crowd erupted into applause and cheers. Camera drones hovered for a better angle. Journalists scrambled to get the perfect shot. His fame increased massively after the release of the commercial holographic technology and computers. So, people were expecting something groundbreaking again from him. Howard and Maria stood in the top gallery, looking at their son with pride. Natasha was also there with them. As for Yelena, she wanted to come, but someone had to look after the Celestial Island. Tony raised one hand and gave a single nod. "Welcome to the future," he said into the mic confidently. "And thank you for showing up to meet it halfway." The applause returned, louder this time. He let it settle before continuing. "This year, the Stark Expo isn't about products. It's not about sales or shareholders. It's about people. The thinkers, builders, and risk-takers who work in basements, garages, and midnight labs. The ones who dream past the limits the rest of the world tells them to accept." A pause. Then he smiled slightly. "And I'm done pretending science needs permission to change the world." That line hit. It echoed across the crowd like a spark. "So, without delaying further, let's begin." He pointed toward the 16-year-old boy standing on his right. The spotlight fell on him. The boy stepped up beside Tony, stiff at first, blinking under the lights. He wore a plain sweatshirt and jeans, hands tight at his sides. His name lit up behind him in bold white letters, Alex Reyes, age 16, Bronx. He was nervous. Tony looked at him, then turned to the crowd. "This is Alex. 2 months ago, his school science fair disqualified his project because they said it was too advanced and probably stolen. They gave first place to a baking soda volcano." There were murmurs and a few scattered laughs. Tony continued. "Alex built a microdrone the size of a fingernail. It maps interiors in real time and sends data to any device with less than a 1-second delay." The screen behind them shifted to a close-up of Alex's drone. Then a live feed from its camera. It flew out over the crowd, zipped through a narrow camera rig, and back again. People gasped. This is the future of surveillance, disaster response, and urban search. And he built it on spare parts. The crowd applauded, this time louder. Alex smiled, just a little. Tony clapped him on the shoulder. He's now a fully funded developer under the Stark R&D grant. Next. Another spotlight. Another name. Dr. Mei Tanaka, robotics researcher, dismissed from Midney, introduced her as she stepped onto the stage with a calm, collected gait. Mei was fired from her lab because her employer didn't believe assistive robotics for elderly care had a real market. They told her to shift her research toward combat exosuits for defense contractors. The screen lit up with her prototype. A soft, joint-assisted exosuit that could be worn by people with arthritis or recovering from strokes. It moved gently, responding to muscle impulses with smooth, lifelike grace. She demonstrated it herself, lifting a weight her frame had no business carrying, then letting go without a sound. She didn't want to build weapons, Tony said. She wanted to help people stand up. And now she will. Stark Industries has provided her with a full lab, a team, and no military strings attached. Next came a young woman in a wheelchair, Lena Catry, age 22, engineer, rejected by 5 universities. Tony waited as the audience quieted. Lena rolled herself to the center, unbothered by the silence. A female assistant carried a chair and placed it on the stage. She sat down on it. This is Lena. Every institution she applied to told her she lacked formal credentials. None of them bothered to test what she could actually do. Tony glanced at Lena, then stepped aside and gestured to her with a small nod of encouragement. She built something unique. Personal mobility without wheels. The crowd leaned in. Lena tapped a button on her chair's armrest. With a soft hum, the wheels retracted, and the entire frame lifted several inches off the ground. Her chair hovered in place, balanced and still. Then she moved smoothly, effortlessly, gliding across the stage like it was a perfectly polished floor. There were gasps. Whispers of disbelief. Then cheers. Tony smiled as she completed a slow turn and stopped beside him. Zero impact movement. Designed with affordability and modular upgrades in mind. First applications start next month in hospitals and mobility clinics across the country. And it started in a garage in Queens. The applause rolled louder. Lena gave a small, quiet wave and returned to her place. Tony turned slightly toward the other side of the stage. Next. A man in his early 30s walked up. Messy hair. Lab coat. Looked more like a night shift tech than a keynote guest. Name flashed on screen. Julian Park, biochemist, unfunded independent. Tony nodded toward him. Julian cracked a food packaging issue no one was solving. Not because it wasn't important, but because it wasn't profitable. Julian raised a clear film between his fingers, barely visible. Biodegradable, edible, shelf-stable for up to 2 years. Breaks down naturally within 48 hours in soil or water. Costs less than a penny per unit to produce. A projection showed the material being exposed to rain. It dissolved instantly into a harmless mix, completely gone. No more plastic wrappers in landfills, Tony said. No microplastics in oceans. He did it without a lab team. Just time, tenacity, and his kitchen stove. The crowd clapped again, louder this time. Whistles. Someone in the back shouted, "Finally." Julian gave a humble bow and walked off. Tony gave the signal again. Next. After a few more demos, the name appeared, Dr. Susan Storm, geneticist, independent researcher. Tony stepped toward the center stage again. Our next speaker is someone I met not long ago. And in that short time, she's done what most institutions couldn't accomplish in a decade. She's not just brilliant, she's relentless. She's spent years chasing an answer no one wanted to fund, no one wanted to risk, and no one wanted to believe could work. He turned slightly toward the side of the stage. She built a cure. Not for a disease, but for a burden. For a life people didn't choose. A murmur passed through the crowd. Tony continued. This is Dr. Susan Storm. And what she's about to show you is the beginning of a new kind of choice. The spotlight shifted. Susan stepped forward in a fitted black blazer over a slate gray shirt and narrow leg pants, her hair tied back. She walked calmly, carrying a small, flat case in her left hand. She stopped at the center, just past Tony, and faced the crowd with quiet command. "Good morning," she began. Her voice was steady. Clear. I'm not here to talk about erasing anyone's identity. I'm here to talk about agency. About the right to choose what kind of life you want to live. She held up the case and opened it. Inside was a small glass vial, faintly glowing with a pale violet hue. This is the Recode Serum. It doesn't suppress abilities. It doesn't fix a mutation. It does one thing, and one thing only, restores biological equilibrium to people whose mutations are causing them pain, instability, or progressive internal damage. The screen behind her came to life, showing side-by-side genetic models. Mutated genes flickering erratically on one side. On the other, stable strands post-serum application. There are mutants who can't touch their loved ones without causing injury. Children whose bones grow faster than their skin. People with voices that rupture organs. For too long, they've been ignored, hunted, imprisoned, and discarded by society and the law. She paused. This isn't about fear or being normal. It's about the freedom to say, I don't want to suffer for something I didn't ask for. The crowd was silent. Focused. Listening, Susan continued, her tone unwavering. This serum is voluntary. Reversible. It rewrites nothing that wasn't already trying to repair itself. It doesn't erase the mutation. It stabilizes the unstable cells. So people can heal. Or sleep. Or stop hiding. The screen behind her showed a simulation where mutation cells were stabilizing without scarring. A girl's arm stops mid-shift from a spasm-inducing mutation. I've tested it. In the lab. On simulated samples. And now, thanks to the resources and support of Stark Industries, we're moving toward real-world trials under full medical oversight. Ethical, consent-driven, and free of corporate ownership. More details will be announced soon. Applause started. Light at first, then growing. Some stood. Others just sat, stunned. Susan stepped back slightly and let the screen fade. I didn't come here to ask for anything, she said. I came here to show that even the worst problems aren't impossible. Just inconvenient for the people who don't have to live with them. She closed the case and gave a small nod to the crowd. Thank you. Tony returned to her side as the applause surged again. This time louder. More than polite. It was real. He leaned in and said low enough for her alone, you crushed it. Susan gave him a small smile. I know. Tony stepped back to the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we build expos. He took a deep breath. Now, I guess, it's time for the finale. You must be wondering what I have created during my years of absence from the limelight, other than the perfect holographic technology? Well. Here we go, and I know some of you will drop in numbers and all in this chapter. Please don't. I ain't good with numbers, you already know by now. Grimacing face, grinning face with sweat, and don't compare this to the real world. Tony stood tall under the lights, the weight of the moment shifting in his tone. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The first step toward a better future. I want to show you something, he said. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Some will love me, and some will curse me for this. But for a better future, it has to be done. The screen behind him darkened. Then, grainy footage played. Real, unfiltered. A child in a hospital bed convulsing as doctors scramble. A man screaming as he's wheeled into emergency surgery, his leg already showing signs of necrosis. A woman screaming as her leg twisted unnaturally, the result of a misdiagnosed bone condition. The images kept coming. The raw truth, overlaying those images were statistics, unnecessary loss, 1975, 1990 preventable deaths due to diagnostic error, 251,000 annually, U.S., average cost of full-body diagnostic imaging, $800 plus taxes and other expenses, undiagnosed internal trauma, leading cause of complications in emergency care. There were audible gasps in the audience. Some flinched. Others went still, the video continued. A man losing an arm to an untreated infection that wasn't caught early enough. A teen dying from an internal hemorrhage after a sports injury. Patients being turned away due to cost. Then came the chart. A clean, brutal line graph, the red line climbed, deaths due to misdiagnosed conditions, organ failure due to late-stage detection, and permanent disability from injuries left unscanned. Another line, blue, traced a parallel rise, the average cost of medical diagnostics. Tony didn't flinch. This is what happens when systems are slow, biased, or worse, built for profit, not people. He paused. The screen froze on a still image of a young boy, his chart reading, undiagnosed neurological disorder, expired, 18 hours after intake. Tony turned toward the audience. This is not just about failure. It's about injustice. He stepped aside, and the display changed. A phone-shaped handheld device floated into view on the screen. The render rotated, its metallic shell gleaming with fine etching along its sides. A pulse of blue lit from the core. AMS, Tony said. The anatomy mapping scanner. The screen split to show a person standing inside a circular platform. A gentle scan swept over them, projecting a full 3D internal map, bones, tissue, nerves, even microfractures and early-stage cellular decay. Every single minute detail, depending on the need. Full body, non-invasive, radiation-free. It scans down to the capillaries. No contrast dye. No delay. 5 minutes flat. He gestured to a new slide, side-by-side images of a traditional X-ray and the AMS output. The AMS showed early nerve inflammation missed by conventional imaging. It identifies anomalies, traces genetic markers, flags infections, and even tracks microtears before they become ruptures. It can link with a diagnosis network or work standalone, no hospital needed. Tony's voice lowered slightly. And I'm not selling it to insurance companies. Or any private investors so that they could earn profits. It's going straight to communities. Clinics. Relief camps. Refugee sites. Schools. Anywhere it's needed. And I'm pretty sure everyone is dying to know the price. $80. At the end of this presentation, a live demo will be provided. Plus, a free checkup for everyone present here. The crowd erupted in applause. Everyone just jumped up from their seats, except for those poor investors who invested in traditional medical equipment. He let the moment hang, then raised a hand to quiet them. The screen faded again. Tony stepped forward, face steady. The silence in the hall was heavy now, expectant. Tony spoke, while some suffer in silence, others suffer in the chaos of the streets. In neighborhoods that get headlines for the wrong reasons. In raids gone wrong. In arrests that turn fatal. In the crossfire of outdated tools and outdated thinking. The display shifted to body cam footage. Officers crouching behind rusted vehicles. A suspect fleeing down an alley. Shouts, confusion, a flashbang going off too close to a child. Then, stats again, law enforcement fatalities, 1986 to 1990 casualties due to outdated gear, 43% injury rate during civilian confrontations, 62% civilian deaths involving non-lethal escalation attempts, 38%. Tony nodded slowly, grimly. We keep giving our frontline officers tools from a war zone and expecting them to operate like surgeons. That doesn't work. Never has. The screen changed. A figure stood under cool white lighting. The image sharpened. A suit, matte black with cobalt trim, shaped to the body but clearly reinforced. No sharp edges. No weapons visible. Aegis suit. The next generation of protection. The figure on the screen moved. Jumped. Rolled. Took a round to the chest and barely flinched. Another screen zoomed in on the material's layers. A titanium polymer weave, flexible but unyielding. Lightweight. Breathable. Fully mobile under fire. High-caliber ballistic resistance without bulk. A wireframe breakdown appeared, showing internal systems lighting up in sequence. Built-in trauma sensors. AI threat detection with real-time HUD feedback. Heart rate monitors, spinal alignment support, emergency defibrillator pads, and non-lethal stun gloves. Another clip played. A training simulation. The suit's user took down 2 aggressors using precise movements and a short, targeted electric discharge. Both subjects immobilized. No permanent damage. No excessive force. Tony looked out over the crowd again. This isn't about giving officers more power. It's about giving them better choices. Faster data. Safer outcomes. For them. And for everyone else. He took a breath. The Aegis suit isn't going to every department. It's going to departments that agree to transparency, oversight, and reform. You want it? You sign the code of conduct. You train with it under human rights doctrine. No exceptions. The audience was quiet again, but not from lack of interest. They were processing it. The implications. The tension between fear and progress. Tony gave it a second, then continued. There will be criticism. That's fine. There should be. But this is how we fix it. With tools that de-escalate, protect, and save lives, not take them. He let that settle, then turned toward the side of the stage again. And before we close, there's one last thing to show you. The footage of highways, city streets, and open deserts, empty of tailpipe smoke, and a map of the country with blue dots. Tony stepped forward, voice steady and clear. Today, I'm proud to introduce the next revolution in transportation. Stark Motors. The screen split into 3 panels, a compact city runabout, a sports car slicing through desert highways, and a heavy-duty transport truck climbing a mountain pass. 0 fuel vehicles, from small to big. 100% eco-friendly. No petroleum. Diesel. No coal. No fuels. No compromises. He tapped the podium. The left panel zoomed in on the sports car's wheel arch. A translucent overlay revealed the microreactor beneath the chassis, pulsing with blue-white energy. 10,000 miles on a single charge. 10,000 miles. Quiet. Emission-free. And built for performance. The center panel switched to a grid of glowing points mapped over a city skyline, charging stations lighting up in sequence. But power means nothing without distribution. Meet the Stark localized charging grid. Mini reactors placed exactly where you need them, gas stations, parking garages, and temporary charging boxes for your personal use, up to 6 charges. 1 charge, 10k miles. Plug in anywhere. The price for each charge is half of what you currently pay for your gas, and it'll be fixed for all vehicles. A moment passed after Tony finished, then the silence broke. The crowd's reaction was instant and divided. One section of the audience erupted into cheers. Students, researchers, activists, and environmentalists stood up, clapping hard, some even whistling. A woman in a lab coat fist-pumped the air. A teenager shouted, "Yes," while pointing at the car. That car looked sick. But not everyone looked happy. Near the middle rows, a group of older men in dark suits murmured among themselves, faces tight. 2 of them leaned toward a third, clearly trying to stay calm while typing on their tablets. One man with a corporate security badge shook his head and whispered, "He's about to kill the energy sector." A few others didn't clap. They just stared. Processing. Calculating. Some skeptical. Some annoyed. Some terrified. One investor folded his arms and muttered, "That's impossible. He's bluffing." Another, older man seated next to him didn't respond. He just stared at the projection of the charging grid, his fingers twitching slightly over the edge of his briefcase. Cameras flashed from every direction as journalists scrambled to cover reactions. Headlines were already being written. Howard and Maria exchanged a glance from the upper balcony. Maria's expression was calm. Howard just exhaled slowly, a small, impressed smile forming on his lips. In the tech VIP zone, Susan crossed her arms, a quiet grin tugging at her mouth. Behind her, Julian, the biochemist from earlier, leaned over and whispered, "He just lit the world on fire." "Yeah," Susan said softly. "But it's the good kind." Back to the stage. "I know what you're thinking," Tony said, voice rising over the buzz. 10,000 miles on a single charge? Zero fuel? It sounds impossible. The room quieted. Everyone wanted to hear how he was going to explain this one. I expected skepticism. In fact, I welcome it. Because I'm not here to peddle hope without proof. So here's what I'm going to do. He turned slightly toward the screens again. Next week, I'm inviting international regulators, engineers, media reps, auto industry watchdogs, energy experts, and every one of those angry investors to a secure facility outside Nevada. Behind him, a map blinked on, highlighting a restricted zone marked Horizon Test Sector A12. There, I'll run a full live demonstration. Real car. Real road. Real diagnostics. Measure the emissions. Check for fuels or whatever you want. And if any of you find a gas tank in that chassis, I'll eat it. Laughter rippled across parts of the audience. The tension broke just enough to let some oxygen back into the room. But here's the part some of you won't like, Tony added, his tone shifting. He looked directly at the section of suited men who still sat stiff in their seats, jaws tight. I'm not selling patents to oil companies. I'm not licensing the tech to automakers who want to bury it under a decade of delay tactics and boardroom red tape. This is happening. Whether it cuts into someone's profits or not. He let that land. My goal isn't market domination. It's not another $1 billion. It's a livable planet. Breathing cities. Clean skies. Quiet streets. No more poison in the air. No more kids growing up next to refineries. No more wars over barrels. The screen behind him lit up again, this time showing a time-lapse of a major city skyline going from gray to blue, smog fading, stars returning overhead. I don't care if a handful of people lose their investments. I care if my future generation can walk outside in 80 years without a respirator. And if that means some old stock portfolios crash, so be it. As for job loss, we are opening multiple facilities around the world. So, there will be plenty of job opportunities. There was a pause. Tony scanned the crowd again. A quiet confidence settled into his posture. I didn't build these technologies to be stored in a vault or to feed boardroom greed. I built them because I could. Because they should exist. And now they do. He gave a small nod. So, for those of you still in denial, still whispering to each other about lawyers and delays and sabotage, I dare you. Tony smiled. Try it. See how far you get. I've already made the data open to international regulators, safety boards, and environmental councils. And after the live demo, the global open license distribution begins. No one can bury it. No one can steal it. He paused. Then, just as the stage lights dimmed slightly, he said one last thing. And if you still think I'm bluffing, he pointed at the main screen. Next week. Nevada. I'll be there. Bring your doubts. The lights dropped, the crowd roared, cameras flashed, some people stood to applaud. Others stood just to storm out. Tony didn't care. He had just thrown down the gauntlet on the old world. And this time, he wasn't waiting for permission, this was just the beginning.